Hey everyone, Dave K here, and today I'm going to talk about moving. I've moved many times for work, and a lot of people have asked how you get comfortable with moving so much. So let me talk you through my experiences and thoughts. Let's do it. Dave K here today, getting us started with a conversation about moving. I've moved many times for work, and a lot of friends have asked me about my moving experiences, how I get comfortable with moving around so much, how I meet new people, all those sorts of things. So I want to take some time and talk you through it. For starters, I want to let you know that my experience with moving has mostly been for work. So when I moved, with the exception of going off to school, every move after that was because work needed me to move to a particular location, or the job opportunities in that particular location were the most beneficial to my career at the time. So all of my experience moving has been work related. That being said, I've moved around quite a bit, and I haven't really stayed anywhere too long with work. You know, I've had jobs that have had me move cities with that same job multiple times in the past as well. So that's something to keep in mind, is sometimes not only do jobs have you move to one particular location, but jobs will have you move to a variety of different locations over the course of your career with a particular job or a particular company. So that's something to keep in mind. I've also been asked how to get comfortable making new friends when you move. This can be a challenging question and a challenging conversation to address. Now for me, there have been a couple different ways that this works out best in terms of making friends in a new city. A lot of the times, the connections and the friends that I gain in a new city will come through work. So I'll make friends where I work. I'll get connected with people in different groups at work, or for multiple different reasons. You know, maybe there are interest groups at work that I'll connect with others through, or for other reasons, perhaps I'll be working with someone regularly and I sort of build that friendship. That's something to keep in mind. At the same time, there may be situations where you may not want to make as many friends at work. So let me talk you through another example, another idea of how I like to make friends when I travel to new places. Another thing that I do, and I've had the experience of making friends in new cities and in new places, is joining interest groups. So for example, I joined Toastmasters when I moved to the San Francisco area, had the opportunity to join that group because I was interested in improving my public speaking skills and my presentation skills. You know, that's something that's been of interest to me for quite a while, and so I joined a group there in order to improve those skills. Now, when I joined that group, obviously I met a lot of people with that same interest who really wanted to improve their public speaking skills and their presentation skills. And so you'll find that joining groups like that, almost clubs if you will, or extracurricular activities that allow you to meet people with similar interests, can be a fantastic way to make friends in a particular area. I also get connected to new friends through friends. So for example, let's say I move somewhere or I've met someone through work, I could get connected to that person's friends. So all of the friends that they've made living in that particular area, I then get connected to and can build friendships that way as well. So a network of friends, if you will, is a good way to continue to grow your friend network after you've met those initial friends at work or those initial friends in those interest groups like Toastmasters. One of the things that I love to do when I move to a new area is try new food. My experience in moving places and trying some delicious food has definitely been successful. So I definitely recommend that. If you're moving somewhere new, depending upon what your interests are. For me, I like to try new food. That's what I like to experience and spend my time doing. So going out and trying new food in a particular area, to me, is one of the best ways to get comfortable with an area and start to appreciate the environment that I'm in. You can look at several different apps, you know, food review apps, or just looking at your Maps application and see how many stars a particular food venue has, can all be great ways to figure out which food spots may be spots that you would enjoy. However, what I like to do is I like to look for particular types of food within that food app, so let's call it Apple Maps. I'll look through the different types of cuisine offered in a particular area. I'll look at how far that food is from me, where I'm trying to go. I don't want to have to drive too far. And I'll also look at the ratings and the reviews of that particular location. Now, I will hear from friends, or I'll look on that app and see places that are reviewed very highly, and maybe I'll make it a special occasion, or I'll make it an agenda to go to a particular location. Otherwise, I'll just look at ratings and look at some of the pictures of the food at some of these places I want to try. So one of the best ways for me to get comfortable with a new area is to check out new food. Something else I like to do to get comfortable with a new area is I like to look for water activities. For me, I enjoy spending time on the water. So whether it is boating or spending time at a beach, going on a lake and tubing down a lake or something along those lines, I've been able to find water-related activities to most of the cities that I've moved to. Fortunately, I've been in places that have either lakes or beaches or oceans, a variety of different water activities, and that's something that I enjoy a lot. So going to check out those places, spend time there, and be around and be near something that I already know that I love quite a bit helps me accept and really appreciate living in a new location. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, think about what is it you really know and what is it you really love to do and you know you love to do, and look for those sorts of things when you move to a new location that you can really immerse yourself in and you know you'll enjoy, so that you can appreciate that new location that much more. Another thing I like to do is look at the cities and the more densely populated areas in a particular location, but also some of the quieter areas in a particular location. So for example, when I was living around Austin, I would go into the city and see everything that there is to do in the city, get to experience some of the different restaurants within the city and see what the housing looks like and see what the communities look like within the city, but also go the opposite direction. I live south of Austin, so going even further south in Austin, going down to even San Antonio or some of the suburbs, some of the more quiet areas along the way. That's where I found some of the lakes that I would get to tube down, that I would experience those quieter lakes, or going to some food venues that may not be crowded at all, that may be wide open. I did find some shopping malls that had very few people altogether, but they were fantastic places, and whenever I was feeling like a particular type of food, like an Asian food, there was a spot I always liked to go to in a quieter area. So to be able to drive around and see what the busier parts of town look like and see what the quieter parts of town look like can be a great way to see different types of environments and different types of communities and figure out what you really like to do. Another question that friends have asked about is moving my stuff. It can be very expensive to move, and it's a question of how can you move to so many different places and make it affordable. Now, if you are moving for work, one of my suggestions would be check with work to see if they have relocation support or relocation benefits to help you move to a particular location. I've had jobs that have helped me move and have relocation benefits, and I've also had jobs that do not. But sometimes those jobs that do not may still be able to provide some insights around, well, these are nice neighborhoods you might want to look at, or here are some restaurants you may want to try. So although they may not provide assistance financially in helping you relocate, they may still have some insights or some knowledge into some areas you may want to check out, or some areas you may not want to check out quite so much. Another thing I like to consider when considering the cost and the price of relocating and of moving is how much stuff do I really need? You know, I have a lot of belongings, or you may have a lot of belongings, and you find that you don't actually need all of those belongings, you know? It can be very difficult to move larger items. For a while, I had a couch. You know, I had a large sectional couch which had multiple parts to it, but I found myself moving so much that I determined that it just didn't make sense for me to hold on to that couch. I really did like that couch, and perhaps one day when I get a house and I settle down somewhere, I will have a couch like that again, but I found that moving around so much, it just wasn't cost effective to carry that couch around everywhere I went. So make sure that you consider how much a particular item is worth to you, how much it might cost at a store, and also consider how much it might cost you to move that item to wherever you're going next, and determine how many moves am I going to be making in the coming years, and how much do I really want to move that particular item around with me. Now, it may be worth it to bring that item around with you. For example, I find that my computer, my desktop computer, although it is expensive as well and it can be a little bit pricey to move, I find that it's worth it. It does a lot of work that I need it to do. I can't quite get something else to replace the desktop computer. I could get a laptop, but it wouldn't be quite as good of a computer. I couldn't do the same amount of editing, I couldn't play the same amount of games or do the same amount of streaming that I'm able to do now with a desktop computer. So that's something to consider, is not just the cost of something or the cost of moving it, but the value of it and the amount of impact that it has on your everyday life. So for me, moving the computer and the desktop computer and all the pieces that went with it, like the monitor, are far more worthwhile for me than moving something like a couch. Another thing to consider when moving is transportation. Depending upon how far you're going, there may be limited options for transportation. You may find yourself having to take a boat or a plane. You may not be able to drive. You may be looking at driving as an option, or you may only be considering flights because it's very far across the country, but it's not over a particular body of water. So there are many options to consider in terms of transportation, and that may also impact what you choose to move. I moved once 3-hour drive across Texas, and I was able to take a lot more of my stuff from one part of Texas to another part of Texas with a moving company that was able to take my bed and able to take my couch, versus when I moved my stuff from Texas to San Francisco, I found that I had to cut down on a lot of those belongings just to make sure that I could minimize those expenses and that I could get to where I needed to go and not have to worry about carrying all this stuff with me or how much space I would have when I get there. Now that's something to consider as well when you're moving, is how much space that you'll have. If you know what sort of environment you're moving into, that does help. But for me, going from Texas to San Francisco, I found that my room got significantly smaller because the cost of living in San Francisco is way more expensive than the cost of living where I was living in Texas. So something to keep in mind is how much space you'll have where you're going. I found that I needed to keep a lot of what I owned packed up until I was really able to move again in San Francisco or somewhere outside of the city of San Francisco or even away from San Francisco as a whole in order to be able to open all my stuff and unpack everything and really be able to get use out of everything that I have. So something to consider is how long you'll be somewhere in addition to how much space you'll have in that new location. Something else to keep in mind is the conditions of a particular environment that you're going to. For example, moving from Texas to San Francisco, I found that I might need some jackets that I didn't have in Texas. Or for example, I may not get as much use out of shorts as I used to in Texas or in Florida or something along those lines. So something to keep in mind is those conditions of the environment in which you're living. That does generally factor into, and one of the big things I'm referring to there is weather and clothing that is good for colder climates or clothing that is good for warmer climates. And it is possible you may be moving with a situation where you may be able to leave some of those items with someone else or put them in storage or leave them with a friend or some family. And so that's something to keep in mind. If you're going somewhere where you won't need or you will need hotter or colder clothing, make sure you consider the conditions of where you're going and bring those items that you think you'll get use out of. For example, if you're going somewhere only for a particular season as well, maybe you only need certain items for that season. If you're skipping the winter season, you may not need a jacket after all. If you're going somewhere where it doesn't rain at all, maybe you leave your umbrella and your raincoat behind. Just something to keep in mind as you're looking at moving to a new environment. Another thing to consider is entertainment. If you're moving from somewhere more crowded, more populated to somewhere a little bit more quiet, or vice versa, you may consider different forms of entertainment to be more or less valuable. For example, for me, I may find that I bring a PS4 to a work environment, or let's say I'm moving to somewhere a little bit quieter, I may bring a video game console there, versus if I'm going off to school, I won't have as much time to play video games, so I'm not going to bring a video game console. That's something to keep in mind as well. How much free time will you have to utilize all the things that you have for entertainment or the other things that you have for fun? So something to consider is what you actually need to bring, not just for weather conditions, but also for entertainment purposes, what you'll actually enjoy and get use out of. Now, I understand you may need to bring everything that you own to those places if you plan to keep them at all, because this move may not just be a move for you to go off to school and come back or anything along those lines. But in the event that it is, I just want to give you another variable to consider. Another piece of moving you'll want to consider is logistics. I know a lot of people worry about this piece. Will I hire movers? Will I rent a moving truck? Will I get rid of enough personal items where I'll just be able to fit everything in my car? And all of these things have different factors and levels of importance in addition to impact on your move. For example, if you move everything yourself, you may find that it's far more cost effective. However, it might take you a lot more time, and you may find it very challenging to drive a moving truck or to try to fit everything in your car and not have to worry about throwing things away. So that's something to keep in mind on that aspect. Versus if you're hiring movers, you may find that it's very expensive, but it saves you a lot of time. But then you have to worry about making sure the movers get everything that you want them to get in that moving truck. Where you're moving to and how far you're going to be moving does factor into those logistics as well. Will you be getting a plane flight? And if you're getting a plane flight, how far in advance do you want to book that flight? Do you want to try to figure out some last minute logistics, or do you want to try to get that flight earlier on and see if you can save money by booking several months in advance? There's many pieces to consider in those logistics, and it's something to keep in mind as you're planning that move. You want to figure out how you're getting yourself where you're going, and you want to consider how you're getting your belongings and your stuff where it is you're going. You'll find that it can be very challenging to consider the logistics for your belongings. And generally, it's easier, at least for me, to say, okay, I'm going to book a flight for myself on this day with 2 pieces of luggage and just kind of go, as opposed to having to worry about, all right, I've got these movers coming on this day, and I've got my own flight on this day, and I'm going to try to have them load up everything on this day, and whatever's left behind I'm going to take with me on the flight or drive in my car. So that's something to keep in mind is, what are those logistics for you? Will you have flexibility for someone to plan and to meet the movers for where you're coming from or where you're going to? Do you want to move enough stuff to have to worry about movers, or what makes the most sense to you? But that's something to keep in mind. And that's a piece you're going to want to touch on early on in your plan to move is, how am I going to coordinate this move? What am I bringing with me? And how is my stuff going to get from point A to point B? We touched on the importance of considering the amount of size and space that you'll have where you're going, but you also want to make sure you're doing your research. Where exactly in that area are you going to live? Have you booked that apartment, or have you looked at that new house? Have you found a hotel where you're going to be staying for a particular period of time? You want to make sure that you are also planning for where you're going to be staying early enough on, because you'll find a lot of the time prices for apartments or prices for hotels as you get closer to the last minute become more and more expensive. So know where you're going and what kind of environment you'll be going into really as early as you can before you make that move. One of the last things you may want to consider is your exit strategy. What makes it worth it to you to stay in that particular area? Let's say you're working somewhere and unfortunately you needed to find a new job, and that job that asked you to move to that new city wasn't the job you were working for anymore. Do you want to stay in that city? Does it make sense from a cost of living perspective? Do you enjoy that city enough to stay there? Is there somewhere else you'd rather be that's closer by? Or is there some reason for you to move further away? Those are all things you want to consider. What makes that city worthwhile to you to stay in? And you may decide that, well, although this job is great, this city or this location just isn't what I like. And that's something I really like and I really enjoy about having had the opportunity to move around so much. I've got a better and better understanding of what I like and what sort of cities I like and what sort of states I like and what sort of environments I like, how quiet I like a neighborhood to be, or what kind of weather I enjoy somewhere that I'm living. So that's something to think about and to appreciate as you're making the move. Although it can be stressful to consider everything you have to move and the amount of time it takes for you to coordinate all those things and the amount of energy you'll have to put in to make that move happen, also think about and appreciate and be excited for the opportunity to experience something new and learn a little bit more about new areas and figure out a little bit more about yourself and what you enjoy and where you enjoy being and what you really want to see when you find that time to actually settle down and figure out where you want to stay long term. You'll have a clearer and clearer picture of exactly what that looks like. What did you think of this video? Are you considering moving sometime soon? Do you have any other questions about moving, or did you find this video helpful and answered all your questions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for being a part of the fun with me. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to hear. And if you haven't already, for more fun, family-friendly adventures and chats, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to stay informed. Until next time, play on.